John was actually serious, but he was thinking about singing something to everybody when we first started here.
Well, I'm not going to sing it, but I have an important announcement. I love my shirt because it says Army.
Discharged and unfiltered.
And that's how we're going to start this.
And that's how we're going to start this today.
Fight me.
So this is going to be a good time. But the serious part of today's conversation is we're going to be going back and forth, sharing some experience, sharing some opinion, sharing some actual expertise on the matter. And the matter is, how veterans can be a benefit to company culture, but how we understand culture. So does anybody want to kick that off?
You know what? I'll kick it off.
Okay.
So I think we definitely have to talk about culture because there is a rift, right? We throw the word culture around. And when I say we, I mean everyone. The military throws it around, the civilian side throws it around, but we don't really understand what culture means. Now in the military, we get cultured from day one, right? As soon as you hit wherever duty station your basic training at, they start instilling those values into you. You brought your own values from your home and your upbringing, and you have your personal values, but then you have your military branch values, and they're putting that into you. And that's the culture they start building you around. They start with the values, they start with the morals, and they start with that team cohesion. Now, what you see on the outside in the civilian sector is a business is just going to throw the word culture around, and some are good, but they're going to throw that word culture around and they're going to say, this is how we're defining ourselves as an organization. But in that instance, not everyone is buying into it or has those same values and principles, right? In the military, it sort of gets ingrained into you and brought that way. But in the corporate culture, you're not getting that same, ingrained into you, truly living it unless they're already part of your values. And that's where the first disconnect happens.
Well, I want to throw something out because this actually happened to me at one of my roles. And ironically, the majority of the team was prior military of some shape or form. We even had a Canadian military guy on the team. And we had a 13-page document just for our team that outlined our team culture, complete with, I think it was 13 different keywords that we defined. Like, it was, if you ever wondered what was going on with our team and how we built it by design, that document explained everything about how you get along with the team, to the point where every month one person would volunteer and pick one of the attributes, do a presentation on what that meant to them. And then there was a team-wide discussion every month. And it was also the envy of a lot of other parts of the organization, because they were like, why is this team so different? And that was because we had built our culture. We had built that culture long before I got there. I just merged right in with it.
Well, and they teach us from a very young age that, it's important to have those values. I know John went into some detail on that, but they don't just force us to know these values. I mean, they set up boards where we're supposed to learn this stuff. It's part of the culture where we help people study all these things from a very young age in the military. The values are posted in every major facility if you're on an Army base, the Army values. If you're on the Marine base, the Marine values, Air Force, Coast Guard, so on and so forth, all the way down the line. And they do that because they really want people to know that this is what they want from the people in their organization. And everybody learns that stuff. There's the Soldier's Creed as well. There's all the things that they really tell us in detail all the time what they want us to have for our values at work. What civilian organizations don't do is sometimes they don't even identify what they want those values to be. Mm-hmm. They don't know what they want their culture to be. They want good people, but culture isn't about just having good people. Do you value starting and finishing a project quickly? Do you value the planning process? Do you value long-term execution and having a calendar for 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be. I mean, there are so many things that go into culture. Those are just some of the things that I can think of right off the top of my head. But veterans, we understand these things because we lived it, and it almost got hammered into our heads on a regular basis. And sometimes we had to do push-ups if we didn't know the answer to these things.
Well, but here's one thing that I would kind of push back on your point about it being everywhere, and that is that those were the ideals that the branch wanted us to live up to.
Yep.
That does not mean that every single person that wore a uniform lived up to those values, because that's why there's military police, there's UCMJ and all those things. And in some cases it could borderline into brainwashing. Let's look at Marines.
Well, yeah, but that goes all the way down the line, doesn't it? That's all branches of service.
Yeah.
Yes, they want you to be a certain way. Why? Because it's not like a regular job. And there's going to be a time where we're going to be potentially putting bullets down range, maybe even taking incoming fire or mortars or whatever the case may be. And so we need to have a different level of trust between us in the military, and those values kind of outline that, especially because we can't leave people behind, all the things, right? And so when you really think about the values, though they may be brainwashed a little bit more, there's really some value that civilian organizations could take from the practices that the military has, just because whether you're forcing it down people's throats on a regular basis, if you have these values and you want the culture to be a certain way, but your managers on the bottom level don't even know what the values are, and they don't even know what you want your culture to be, then that gap, that left hand not talking to the right, not talking to the left, not talking to the right, back and forth, so on and so forth, all the way down the line, it turns into chaos. And then you don't really know what's wrong. But there's definitely an issue, and it when you're managing or owning a business that has those type of issues, but you can't put your finger on it. And that's one of the biggest things. Say that again.
But we have a mission statement that's posted everywhere.
That no one reads.
No one reads. And by the way, ask some of the brand new supervisors or managers what that is.
Well, but
JJ's driving a good point here, right? And Trevor, you kicked off this good point, is the fact that the people of the organization, one, have to know what it is, but they have to live it. And that's the difference, right? Trevor, you mentioned a minute ago, like, just because the Army has all these values doesn't mean everyone in the Army follows them. Same with the Marines, Air Force, all that, right? Because you have to embody the values, you have to live the values, but that's why they're there. But that's what builds the culture. Because I love in organizations, it's like, yeah, we're all about integrity. Okay, well, define integrity for me. Well, it means this, this, and this. Cool. Didn't you just go against that and all your subordinates saw it? Well, it's different when you're no. That's not
leader. When you're a leader, that's when it should be different, and you uphold the standard, not violate the standard.
Yep. And even if you are upholding it, or you're living it, if you're allowing it at lower levels, you're still that problem. Because if you make an exception somewhere, you must make an exception everywhere.
And the other thing to think about too is when we talk about culture in the military, it was almost forced into us in a way, because you didn't get to pick who you were with. You didn't get to pick your battle buddies or your teammates or anything. You barely got to pick your job if you were lucky. And now you're in a corporate environment where everything is at your disposal, at your choice. And we can say, I can hear the argument of, well, I need a job to survive. Yes, you do. But you don't need this job to survive. You can go find somewhere else if you're that unhappy, angry, whatever it may be. So the idea of how do you build that culture starts at the top and has to have that buy-in, like we talked about, where everyone's got to drink the Kool-Aid and everyone's got to believe in the Kool-Aid.
Oh,
yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Like Fort Bragg.
Say that again.
Like Fort Bragg. Everyone believes in the Kool-Aid.
Only on one side of the post. Only on one side of the post.
Well, we don't talk about the other side. They're not real Fort Bragg.
Exactly.
By the way, if you are tuning in anywhere other than YouTube, please let us know where, because for some reason it did not go live there. I am going to post the YouTube link to LinkedIn because I'm getting some private messages saying that it didn't work. So if you do have if you are on LinkedIn and you are watching this, please share how you're doing that. But I'm going to go ahead and reply to the post that I put for the announcement for this, and I'm going to put the link for everybody to follow along with us on YouTube. So you guys keep going. I'm going to post this up there so that people can follow along.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah,
Actually,
and
I want to chafe some people's thighs today about talking about, since we're talking about culture, right? We're talking about those things. One of the best measurements that I do when I go into an organization and I start working with their culture, I'm going to talk to the leaders. And one of the main things I hit on is, if you were to walk away right now for 2 weeks, take a 2 week vacation, can't have a phone, can't have a computer, can't check your email, what would that do for you? Right. And of course you get the basic answer, oh, that'd be great, it'd be nice, da, 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 da. So why don't you? Well, okay, you have a crappy culture, because if you can't step away as a leader to do something else, that means you've created a bad funnel, a bad system that either lies to itself or it's so inefficient and you allow it. And they
or
get uncomfortable when I say that.
or I could throw a third one out there. And John, me and you have seen this as PMs.
Mhm.
You've got the person who's built everything around them as being the single point of failure to keep their job, to keep their security of their role.
Mhm.
So they do it by design, and then they've got the reason to complain about why they can't do anything because no one else can do it, because they built that structure around them.
Mhm. Or
And
or the opposite side of that coin is, you have that performer. JJ's a performer. He's out there performing, and now you punish him with other people's problems. And
well,
guess what?
that
JJ's a performer, and he performs and he performs and he does well because he believes in the mission and the organization and whatever. And yet he watches John get promoted ahead of him when John punted off everything. And
well,
that's
part of that, I actually just wrote about this. I think it was either within the last couple of weeks about, or actually it might be publishing this week. I don't know, but it's about saying yes to everything is the most dangerous thing you can do in a corporate environment, because you have to know how to say no to build those boundaries. Because if you say yes to everything, what happens? You're the go-to person because you'll say yes. And even if it's not in your lane, not in your purview, oh, Trevor will do it. I'll just go dump it on. I'll go ask Trevor. He'll say yes. He'll dump it all on him.
Mhm.
Well, and so that's a double-edged sword for the people that do that. And you know, when you're getting the praise, it doesn't feel bad at first. But what happens when you're that person who accepts that? By the way, I said accepted it. That
Mhm.
you don't want to always accept all the work, because what's going to happen is eventually you're going to build resentment for the people who are doing that, that giving you all that work. Plus, you're going to be building resentment for the people that are alongside you that don't have to do as much as you do. And those people that work alongside you are going to be building resentment towards you. So at the end of the
Oh
day,
no, they won't be resenting you at all. They'll be ecstatic because you did what they didn't have to.
I so yes, sometimes I will tell you that my very first job out of the military, I was working for an organization that, you know, I was kind of a ground pounder at first, and I was right alongside a lot of the other right of the other execution level employees. And so I was working, you know, I was just doing what I thought was right and working and working and working. I did accept the extra stuff. And apparently I was going fast. And so I was that overachiever. And so what they were telling me is that I shouldn't do that.
You were
And,
messing with their rhythm.
Yeah.
well, yeah, that now they expect more from us. And not only that, but you know, if you're doing all of this and they don't ask more of us, that you're making us look bad. We didn't ask for you to do all that extra work. They asked for you to do all that extra work, and they could have given
Mhm.
some of that to us. But since you want to do that, now they're always going to look at you as that guy who just works his butt off to make everybody else look bad.
And there's one other thing there too.
Yep.
It's not just the resentment, but the burnout. Because
Mhm.
if you're the one doing all that extra work, doesn't matter if everyone else is doing it or not. Eventually, you run out of bandwidth, you run out of anything that you can do on that meter, and then you're just done with a pile of stuff left to do.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep. And we are getting some comments in over here while I was posting that. So Kay Plenner said, oh, that's probably Deb. Absolutely, it is critical for the team to be turning left or turning right. Yes. I find that extends to spouses too. We need to support the mission and culture, or we can't keep the family together. People don't always consider that when it comes to an organization's culture. And, a lot of companies don't think about the people that are there at home supporting the people that are working, which sometimes the spouse is not working. And, all I will say about that is that all of the things should be considered, but knowing that you need to understand who your employees are, understand their strengths and weaknesses, and what motivates them. So, part of building your company culture is during the interview process. If you know your values and you know that you value people for who they are, and there's the work stuff, right? But you also, if you value your employees and what they think, you should be asking them about what motivates them, so that you can, I wouldn't say cater anything to that person, because you can't do that. But if these
Well,
people value getting off work on time, then that's going to help you as an employer, because when you're considering throwing out a fish to all the people on the, I'm having a hard time saying this, and I don't know why, but to all the people on the team, when you're planning on handing out some overtime, that there's one that's probably not going to take that, and you need to be okay with that. And that's the manager's job to make sure that those relationships are being communicated up higher. But yes, family is part of work.
well, one of the things that whenever I'm mentoring somebody that's just getting out of the military or even has been out for a while, one of the first things I do is I have them create an order of merit list of their priorities, not just at work, but in life, because that's how you determine where you want to go and what you want to do. Because before you even set foot in that interview, if you don't have your hard lines of what you're looking for out of a role or what your priorities are, then how is anybody else supposed to meet you where you are if you don't even know yourself? If you want to make all the money you can, then be prepared to be on the road, be away from your family if you have one, possibly be traveling, possibly be working all unknown hours, all those things. You have to be willing to know that that's what's going to happen to make all that money. If your
Yep.
family's important, odds are you're going to take a hit on pay because you can't always be available.
Yeah. Yeah. And employers don't always make sure that they're interviewing people to make sure that that they're right for the job, but that also, making sure that the job is right for that person as well. This is a values and a principles thing at work, because, when you really think about it, if you don't understand your values and your culture at work, and you're hiring a bunch of people and you're firing a bunch of people, and then you're hiring a bunch of people, and then you're firing a bunch of people, that's the first thing you got to look at. If you're
Well,
not making sure the jobs are for the people that are getting hired, and then you're just only looking at whether or not they would be able to do the work, which, by the way, almost every interview I've had, and I've had a whole ton of them, that I didn't get hired for since I've been out of the military, but there were a few that I did, right? But every interview I've ever been to, it's always them screening me to see if I am a good fit for their organization. I have yet to ever have an interview where somebody is making sure that the organization is a good fit for me. And if you want to make sure people fit in your organization, that they stay long term, so that you don't have to waste all kinds of time, effort, energy, and money training new people all the time, that's a crucial part of it, is making sure that you understand your culture and your values, not just your mission. Thank you, Trevor, for bringing that up earlier. But when during that interview process, it starts there, because it's not just about making sure people are right for your organization. It's making sure the organization is also right for the people that you're interviewing. Otherwise, that cycle of hiring and firing and hiring and firing is just going to keep on going on. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, likely
insanity.
you're crazy. Yes.
Well,
Insanity.
But I am going to push back a little because this is a relationship. I don't care what people say. When you work for an employer or an organization or whatever, or even for yourself, there's a relationship in there.
Of
And
course.
if you, as the person being interviewed, are not asking some of these questions when you get that chance to ask questions,
absolutely.
right? You are letting yourself down just as much. And I love my transitioning service members, but the three of us, we've talked about this in detail. The the folly with a lot of transitioning service members is they're so hyper focused on the next that they just pick the first thing out the gate that they can get.
Yep.
Well,
And
and
more
that's
times than not, it's a misalignment.
where that statistic about how many vets change jobs within the first year, and that's because a lot of them look at it as they're getting out, they need work, so they find something, and they're lost to begin with. And to take it back to culture where we started, I have a story about something because when I was at an organization, I was out of town at a business dinner. Our salesperson was with a client with a couple of clients. I was there with my boss and another high level person. And I noticed our salesperson, who was the one that was driving, had been drinking a lot at dinner. And I was the one who I made it a point on when I'm on company time, I don't drink. So I said something to my boss, and he kind of looked at me and said, okay, and didn't do anything. I let it go because I didn't want to make a scene because it was a client, all that stuff. We get in the car, as you would expect, the guy was driving around erratically.
Hmm.
The other high level person that I was very good friends with looked at me and said, "What the heck?" And I said, "Oh, he's hammered." And he looked at me and said, "Why didn't you say anything?" I said, "I did." I said it to the other person. And he looked at me and said, "If you had said it to me, I would have never let him drive." And later on, both me and the other person reported this higher up, and nothing happened because the guy brought in business. You know, that was the unspoken answer to everything, was he brought in business, so we left him alone. And ultimately, my first thought was, why are we not getting this guy help?
Mhm.
Not even anything else. He almost killed two clients, three other staff. And we're not even looking at trying to get this guy help or resolution or anything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Dang. Well, let's go ahead and look at this real quick because Bravo Mission Radio, they left a comment on here. I think some companies prey on veterans that just got out to get them to settle for a job right out of the service.
Oh,
I'd like
that
to
is true.
unpack that.
I
What's
think
that?
that
That I take that as a true statement. There are, but it's like
Okay.
anything. There's bad apples out there, right? But I don't think that's a true statement for many organizations.
I would argue that's more of the skill bridge and those types of programs than anything, because they're looking for the free labor rather than paying someone.
So this is what I get from a lot of organizations that I've worked with is that veterans are hired usually because they bring a sense of commitment and discipline to the job, which is wonderful. But I also hear that they have an issue with veterans because they don't stay for very long. And so I would say, what is it? The first 18 months, guys, I think it's
Mhm.
18 months after somebody gets out of the military, especially for somebody who served 10 plus years, right? It is common for them to move to a different job. We are used to certain things. So we're talking about culture here. And part of culture is standards, it's discipline, it's all of the things that we are used to, but we're also used to, kind of having a brotherhood. We will talk trash about each other all day long when we're in uniform. But when push comes to shove and something needs to get done, we work together, we put our nose to the grindstone, and we get that crap done. It's like nothing I have ever seen. And there's not a
It,
job that I've worked at in the civilian workforce that is like that. But however, I'm sorry, Trevor, just one second. Um, when we're talking about whether or not they're preying on veterans, I don't know. That's a tough statement to validate, in my opinion, just because they're wanting one thing, the veterans are wanting something, But I think there's a gap here, and this is the whole reason why I wanted to start this show. If you guys remember this correctly, is we got to bridge this communication gap. Veterans, it's our responsibility to make sure we are also screening these jobs before we go and work there. Making sure we're asking the questions to see if this job is good. It's not just their job to make sure their culture is great, because a lot of us civilian employers do not understand how to make a great company culture. They're just going through the motions, getting the work done every day, and completing the mission, which, by the way, we all know too well is something that does need to happen. And in a business, it's not like the military. The military is not going to be defunded and going to stop. So at the end of the day, that the mission will continue there. But in the civilian world, if these businesses do not hire people to do the work, and then that work doesn't get done, well, guess what? That business might have to close its doors. And then how many people are going to be out of a job? So they have a lot of other things that they have to consider that did not necessarily have to be considered when we were in service. And so I want to bring that up too. So it's our job to screen just as much as it is for those employers to screen us.
I just had an epiphany right now when we were talking about this. And that is, how often are we PCSing in the military?
That's between 2 and 5 years. Yeah.
That's essentially changing jobs every 2 to 5 years.
Yep.
So when you get out of the military, odds are, unless you spent an entire career, like some people do in the 82nd, or I don't know what CAV unit you were in, John, that CAV does that. but the idea,
they never let you leave.
What? Yeah, first CAV will never let you leave, even though you beg, kicking, and screaming.
Yeah,
but the idea,
Fort Bragg.
but the idea though is, if you spend a career in the military, you kind of get an itch when it's time to PCS to move on to a different different scenery.
Yeah.
Like, even if you stay in the 82nd, you're going to bounce between brigades, companies, battalions. Like, you're not staying in the same place for 5 years, 10 years. And
finish up.
I was just going to say, and that's a thing that we don't really coach people on, that, hey, when you get out of the military, you could spend 5 years on the exact same team doing the exact same job, and nobody thinks that's out of ordinary or out of place, or you're going to move or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. So real quick, going back, because I totally agree with that. But again, I want to put some perspective on the veterans themselves. Yes, like I said earlier, I do believe there are companies out there that prey on it. I think they're few and far between, right? They're the exception to the thing. There's great businesses out there doing great things, right? And they have great veteran programs. But I lean back onto the misalignment that the veteran has when they get out. They pick that first job out the gate. A lot of the times, I guarantee the conversation, if they're married or have a family, the conversation between the transitioning service member and the family members is very, very minimal. And it's either going to be around money or it's going to be around location, but never those two together. And that's issue number one. I've seen a lot of guys leave their first job, guys and gals leave their first job because this is the first job out the gate. They do love the job. However, they picked a location that was not suitable for the needs of the entire family.
Yeah.
And so it created an issue, a rift, where they ended up having to leave that job, move to where they should have gone in the first place, and then start the search over. Some of it is also misalignment with the job you want versus the location, in terms of, I want to be this great PM in this industry. So I'll just use tech, for example. I want to be a great PM in tech industry, but I want to go to middle of nowhere, Iowa, where tech doesn't exist out there. Right. And so you can't have both if you want to be this great thing and that doesn't exist where you want to go, and vice versa. So I do put some of it back onto the veteran, that they do need to do a little better, but in fairness, a lot of those resources that would help them there are weak at best.
Yes.
And
I agree.
You brought up something there that I thought about too, and that is matching qualifications for realistic expectations of roles, because I've seen it. People get out of the military with the PMP and think, I'm going to go run projects and make 6 figures. And I've been doing this for a long time. And I've talked to people and I've explained to them, look, the military is different from the civilian side. As projects go, they are totally different. but they refuse to listen because they've been brainwashed to think they're so good at what they do. And then when they get out, they don't, the culture shock of difference between government work and private work are not the same.
Yeah.
And that's something that people, that they need to be prepared for, because I saw it firsthand a lot when you get a bunch of military people together and a task and something needs to be done, whether it's something, especially when it's something moved, we just naturally we could be total strangers. Everyone just starts getting in the line, getting in the chain, starts making things happen. Those are the great things that we do. But we also forget that some of that indoctrination is what makes us stand out like sore thumbs in the public sector, because we are different from everyone else. Whereas everybody else might stand around and just wait for somebody to organize it. And then we're the one that organizes the group because that's what we do.
Yep.
And everyone looks at us like we're the crazy one because we're the ones yelling and screaming, saying, let's go, let's get this done. You over here, you over there. And Steve from accounting doesn't like being told what to do. And Sally from customer service is saying, why are you yelling at me?
Jake from State Farm.
and JJ is over there in the corner just laughing at everything.
Well, I had my moments that I had to adapt. I will say that my advantage going from military to civilian was that I had the unique experience of becoming a warrant officer, which means I was in staff environments, which are a lot more similar to the civilian workforce, but they're still not the same. They're a lot more organized.
And you were never around.
Well,
that's only when you hit unicorn stages.
Yes. I wasn't a W4 or W5. Not that they're around any less. I have a few friends, my goodness, they're still doing their thing as a W4 and showing up it's the face of the warrant officer cohort is changing for the better. And they started talking about that when I went through school, all jokes aside, by the way.
Someone saw one at PT once.
Because somebody saw one at PT and said, you should come more often.
No, somebody actually saw where Walks was and was like, this is where all the warrants are.
Yeah, it's hidden by helicopters.
I knew it. Actually, but you know what, Trevor? I'm going to push back a little on what you said earlier. Yes, project management in the military is a lot different. However, there is one thing that is fundamentally true across organizations and across government, military, civilian sector: people, time, and money.
Yep.
Yeah, I was using project management because that's my frame of reference. But I know I've talked with people that work in cyber and a lot of those other places, and they get all the certs, but they don't know what to do with that stuff when they get out because they don't have the direct transferable skills, or they're not armed with the information to make them transferable.
Yeah. What I will say, project manager, logistician like me, doesn't really matter what your job was in the military. When you go to your new position, if you go in thinking that, I have the certifications, I have the degree, I have all it takes to go and do this job, well, guess what? You're right. Don't forget the one fundamental thing that we had to do always in the military and that's when we show up to a new duty station, we shut up and listen. Because at the end of the day, when you learn what needs to happen in that organization and not just think you know it all, and I'm not saying that the veterans think they know it all, but we tend to work inside of a system that we understand very well. And so if you navigate your new system the same way you navigated your old system, it's not going to work. You have to talk to your boss, you have to talk to your fellow employees, and you have to talk, if you are blessed to be able to get that supervisor or management position when you get out, you have to talk to your employees too. You got to leverage them the same as you would have leveraged those people in the military. It's just different because the language, believe it or not, is different. And if you go back to when I was in the Army or when I was in the Marine Corps, when I was in the Air Force, every 5 seconds, you're going to lose people because you know what? At the end of the day, they respect you for your experience, but they don't care.
What about this one time at band camp?
You just made a whole lot of prior E8s and E9s and O5s and O6s really, really upset with that comment. Because listen, great people, done great things, led great organizations, but What they fail to realize is when they get out and they, go get a job with whoever, what they lack is industry experience, right? That's
I,
that's like me being a CEO. Actually, you know what? The Army tried this once where they took a bunch of CEOs from tech and
I
brought them into the Army to lead, and it's not working out as great as they thought it would. Again, it's when you have an industry gap there, you kind of have to kind of start over and learn a bit. You have to learn again. But with that also being said, I will say a travesty that happens in the Army is a really decent program exists called the Cool program that does
mhm.
not get utilized to the extent that it should be, especially to those guys in specialty skills like trade skills and IT skills. But that we could have that conversation a little later if we want. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember, and this was something that hit me kind of hard, was I was at a role and I had a boss who I think he was he might have been an a retired lieutenant colonel or something. And he was saying about how he translated all of his military leadership as a battalion commander, saying that he should be walking into a VP role. So they said, your wife's an accountant, high up accountant, right? Yeah, she's like a VP in accounting. Okay, well, how many people does she oversee? And then he translated that and said, oh, so she would make an amazing battalion commander, just in accounting. She could join the military with all of her experience and go run a battalion. And he's like, that's insanity. No way, no how. And then they waited for the light bulb moment to go off of, oh, it's not the transitive property of, if I did this here, I get to do that there without taking any steps back. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
assume that if you think you're suited for a VP role, you'll be lucky to get a director role going from military to civilian, because you've got to take those steps back and build that experience and that muscle memory of the things you don't know. And then once that kicks in, you get the fast track to move up.
Yeah. And I think the only time you're going to see a really clean transition where you have that I'm a brigade experience and then you kind of go into a similar role is because that's the word, similar role. You probably
Yeah.
just retired out, took off the green suit, went back to the same organization now as a civilian. That's
But
different,
even
right? Because you do speak industry, the
but
industry.
even then, I've seen that one happen, and they forget that the same rules don't apply anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in uniform anymore. So when they go to if we'll talk Army, you get that green suitor who retires, changes into business casual the next day, and then he goes to the same Joe that he went to before. He doesn't have that same authority anymore because he's not in uniform. They
Mm-hmm.
can say to Steve, "You're Steve now," and he's like, "Well, I'm Sergeant." No, you're Steve.
You're Steve.
Exactly.
Your ID card says retired. So
Exactly. Your rank is civilian.
Your rank is civilian. So we talked about values. We talked about a language barrier a little bit. And we can talk more about that in a second. One thing that I would like to touch on is standards and standards enforcement, because that's a really, really important part of the culture gap between what we do in the military, especially if you were an NCO, and what a lot of civilians do. There are a lot of similarities, but I mean, obviously, you're not going to be making people do push-ups or
I mean, I
stay
can't
at
make
work.
Joe in accounting do burpees because I didn't like the report he gave me.
Wait, I can't say some of the most creative insults humanly possible where someone looks at me and goes, I don't even know what to say to that because I don't understand it. But then when they're driving home, they're like, oh, that was, I don't know how to respond to that.
Right. Well, and I will say that there are a lot of things we do well in this arena as veterans, but there are some things that we don't do so well. So if you've spent 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 years under a certain umbrella doing things a certain way, because that's, a lot of people get out of the military after that amount of time. And honestly, the people that I've met and talked to, those are the ones that at first, for the first couple of years, they struggle the most. And John, I'll let you speak to that as well, because I know you served over 20, right? So
Mhm.
um but standards and standards enforcement. See, in the military, standards are written out. We have doctrine, we have regulations, we have technical bulletins and all kinds of stuff that say what we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to be doing things, and so on and so forth, all the way down the line. Yeah, there might be some SOPs in the civilian world. There might be, if you, let's say you are lucky enough to go to a company that has some values and they do a good job communicating those. Enforcement is a little bit different. So in the military, we would let's take away the burpees and the push-ups and all the other things that everyone seems to think that the military does only because they watch a lot of TV. Don't believe what you see on TV, but
I enjoyed writing essays. I enjoyed making my people write essays.
I also did the same thing. So that's the one of the similarities that I was going to bring up. Oftentimes, the punishment has to fit the crime. So if people are showing late to work, well, whatever
Essay on time.
yeah, you figure out an action plan with them. In the military, you oftentimes whatever you did, you had to be there for. It might not always be that way in this civilian world. It should be, but it doesn't always work out that way because say you're not on salary, you might be a manager who has to work certain hours and you can get certain things approved and whatever. But if these guys have to move to a different shift or whatever the punishment entails, sometimes they might be working with somebody else for those things. But there are some differences here. Standards enforcement usually is in black and white. And in the military, oftentimes we could write a counseling statement, submit it to our orderly room, and be done with it. Unless it was severe enough where you're recommending UCMJ, and then that stuff is, yeah. But almost everything you do, because people do a lot of CYA in the civilian world, is oftentimes you have to get involvement from HR, which if it's anything past a conversation, it gets put in black and white. Many of the companies that I've worked with, the paperwork has to get screened by the HR section because they don't want some craziness to go on. So think about it like what you did when you were in the military, where if you wanted the language to be right and you thought this person might have to go in front of up for UCMJ later on, and you want to make sure your language right, just think of HR as like the JAG section or something like that, or maybe S1 or something like that. There are some similarities, but you have to figure out what the system is. You can't rely on what you used to do. You have to figure out what the system is at your new organization. Standards enforcement are a little bit different, and you can't. Raising your voice is frowned upon as a civilian. Sometimes it's not as an active duty service member. Although, if it's warranted, I still found that,
the knife hand is not nearly as effective in the civilian world.
Yeah. What are you pointing at me for? What?
Put those away.
Don't make me unsheath these bad boys.
But
yeah, don't pull those out of the holster, John.
To your point about HR too, I want to bring up something to think about, and that is we are trained throughout the military. There's a book for that. There's a manual for that. There's a regulation for that. Everything. Yep. I mean, I would even wager that there is a technical manual or field manual for how to appropriately go to the bathroom.
Yep.
In the civilian world, you go to two different HR people at the same company and give them the exact same scenario. You could get two different answers.
Yeah.
So it's.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so it's part of what you've got to think about is this a worthwhile fight to take on sometimes versus just letting it go? Because in the military, everything can be a worthwhile fight, and you're backed up by the black and white of the rule of the letter of the law. Even as stupid as it may seem, you've got the FM to prove it. You're right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But if you're not in the civilian world, you could go in there and say something happened, and they could look at you and go, well, you could handle it three different ways. And you're going, okay, well, none of those are ways I want to handle this.
Right.
Well, and that, dude, to that point, though, there's a lot of nuance that goes with it, right? Because you got everything from just the business policy itself, how the business conducts its things. Then you have state law that's involved. You have federal law that's involved. And then you also have, if applicable, unions that are also involved, right? And different states have different rules about the right to work and how you can fire people or performance plans. You know, if you got government workers and you got to put them on a PIP, a performance and improvement plan. So yes, it gets very, very cumbersome and nuanced, especially when you jump states, even within the same organization. The military didn't have that problem, right? Because one book to rule them all, and it is so.
You were obviously not in the 82nd because we had our own book that ruled our own unit, that ruled 82nd land.
Yeah, that's what I said. One book to rule it all, and the rest of the army just adopted that book. I don't care what First Cap says.
I always use wall-to-wall counselings.
Yeah, wall-to-wall counseling. But like, but you have this weird nuance now in that civilian sector, and one that is hard for a lot of veterans. But if you could turn around and also say, you know what, not my monkey, not my circus anymore. Maybe that's not the right thing. But now I'm going to wait.
Back to my point.
Well, I know, but real quick, I'm also going to put a lot of nuance on the organization, because you shouldn't be having these problems if you have strong management who know how to take care of their people, lead their people, but also manage them to the extent that when you have that one out of line child, you call it out, you squash that behavior, and you do whatever your internal policy says that you need to do, because documentation is truth. No matter what, in the end of the day, when you go up against a union or to fire someone, regardless of the state, you're going to have to show proof of why.
Yeah.
And when you start talking about some of that stuff, sometimes the answer, let's say I'm having a problem with one of my staff and I go to my leadership and I say, hey, Mike is not performing. And then my boss goes to me and says, oh yeah, Mike's a problem. But we can't fire him. You just got to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens.
It does.
We just have to, and in the military, that happens too, but you have recourse to make Mike's life miserable while he's being a pain in your butt.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of times there's the whole, no, what's the rule when retaliation, there's no retaliation. And so in the military, it's almost expected that you don't necessarily retaliate against somebody, but you do. Yeah, you do.
You get creative.
And I don't really.
Soaks in the sock.
Oh my gosh, that comment was so good. He blanked out. Look at that.
He was just like, mic drop, I'm out.
Mic drop, I'm out. But no, when it comes to enforcement, there's a lot more involvement goodness, if you took the what is it, military community ambassador program through SHRM, that's a free program. It does a very good job at going into detail about on the culture differences that a service member has over what the average civilian company may have. And it goes into what our lifestyle was like. I mean, my goodness, a soldier can get extra duty in the military, which is them showing up to work after duty hours and be supervised by somebody. Yeah. Supervised by somebody while they're picking up trash, mowing. Let me let John back in here. Picking up the trash, mowing the lawn, painting rocks, whatever. I mean, it is what it is. It's whatever usually the sergeant major and the colonel want done, but
or the staff NCO.
But in the civilian world, that can't happen. Oftentimes, if you have a non-exempt employee who needs to work extra hours, there's usually an approval process for them to work overtime. And so you got to get creative with how you handle that during the day. And really, that doesn't require treating them differently. It's having a good action plan for improvement. That PIP that John was talking about, a lot of organizations have similar things where in order for them to improve, you gotta have the plan, and then you gotta follow up on the plan and make sure that they are getting better. And if not, that you're doing what you're supposed to do to help them out. And so you can't just throw them on extra duty or have them write an essay, because that's also another interesting thing. Hold on, Trevor. I remember the very first time that I asked somebody to stay after to talk to me before they left work. one time when I was a manager, and they looked at me and they said, JJ, I clocked out. You can kick rocks. And my eyes got probably 5 times the size. And then I just thought to myself, they probably did clock out.
Well,
Like,
and
I'm going to have this conversation tomorrow, and it's going to be even better.
but here's the thing that we forget about those types of statements. That person has work to do during the day.
Yes.
So when you pull them aside for that conversation, you're pulling them away from what they need to be doing. So now you've got to decide as a manager, is the opportunity cost of this conversation worth what they could be doing?
Right.
And then you're building the culture, going back to culture. You're building the culture of, is it worth it for me to discipline someone versus them getting work done and having to deal with the trade-off of all those things. You've got all that math going on in your head because you've got a finite amount of time that's time boxed. You don't have the option of slipping to that conversation after work, because if they're an hourly employee, now you're paying them overtime for you to yell at them.
Well, but there's the flip coin of that danger is, once you start accepting it, because this one is the opportunity cost, you've now told every other employee what the new standard is. You just lowered the standard, and now you got to do it for them. And that's that spiral. That's the danger spiral downward. So
you just have
sometimes,
to plan more. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying,
$50 later.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there because how many times have we all looked at those situations and you're like, is this worth it to deal with this versus just let it go? And then you let it go too much and you get into that spiral, and then you address it and everyone's like, wait, I thought that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's another culture difference. Oftentimes when you are on active duty, if you get a promotion, it happens way too common that you're usually leading those same people that you just got done
hanging out with
and smoking and joking with.
Well, I know the 82nd had a rule that when you went from E4 to E5, you were at a minimum supposed to change companies.
Yes.
And then from E5 to E6, same thing. And then when you went to 7, you were supposed to change battalions if you stayed within the 82nd, if you stayed within it, and so on and so forth, to keep you from hanging out with the guys that you were in charge, that you were peers with, and now you could be in charge of them and going back. And there's so many things that can go wrong there.
Yeah. Well, and that wasn't always the case, right? Usually what would happen is you might stay there and be assigned a couple people for a short amount of time, and then have an action plan to move forward, because you can't just those transfers to another unit or whatever the case, they always take longer. But in the civilian world, it happens more often. And you don't, unless you're going to go apply for a new job, which a lot of people don't have the luxury of doing, you're going to be stuck with those people. And so that's also a hurdle that has to be jumped over, especially, gosh, I don't know which one of you just got done saying it, but I heard the comment, I thought you were cool. Well, when you get that promotion and you're working with you have the people working for you that you used to smoke and joke with on breaks.
And think about it this way, especially in the military, before you make E5, where each other's bodies are buried.
Yeah.
And then you make E5, and then one makes E5 out of the group. Now you're not just in charge. Now you might outrank them, but if they put you in charge of those guys, and I'm using guys because that's what I was around in the infantry, but it could be girls, same thing. If you're put in charge of that group of people that you used to hang out with and go out and drink with, or go out and do whatever you did with. Yeah. Remember that time that you did this? And you just look at them and go, yeah.
Still super prominent in the civilian world. But the one thing that I will say is there's a progression and when you're in the military, it doesn't matter what duty station you're at, even if you PCS when you're in E4, when you go to E5, it depends on what time of war we're at or whatever the case may be. But there's education involved in every single major promotion as you start accepting employees under you. In the civilian world, that's not something. And so let's talk a few minutes because we're getting
Hold on.
close to the.
I want
Go
to throw
ahead.
something out. Last thing on that is we used to have a rule that first names were used in civilian clothes, last names and rank were used in uniform, and it was not, the two were not confused, meaning very rarely would somebody break out their rank to get somebody to do something in the civilian world unless it was to stop you from drinking and driving or safety, something for personal safety. Like we tried to split the baby, so to speak, as much as we could and set those boundaries so that when the time came, if somebody broke out, hey, rank and last name, you knew, oh man, I really messed this one up and this is probably saving me from going to jail.
Right.
The next day you knew that, and the time you probably didn't.
Right. No. Yeah. That is true. But, because we have like 4 minutes left before we hit an hour for this call, I want to make sure we highlight, what are the benefits of having a veteran in your organization if things are done the right way. And John, I know that I can't wait to hear your feedback on this because you actually have training programs for organizations that revolve around this. But, at each level, we get training. We're taught how to uh, analyze the culture in your new duty station when you go there. We're taught how to enforce standards. We're taught how to incorporate the values into your personal values and move forward with that stuff because it doesn't always 100% align, and so we got to make sure we're keeping true to service. Now, how can all of this leadership training that we get in the military be a value to your organization, especially since at every level we actually have to practice what we learn? Well, if you hire a veteran and you set and manage expectations with them very well, if you let them know their left and right limitations, how you enforce standards, what your values are, what your mission is, and everything else all the way down the line, what you're going to end up getting once you set those expectations correctly is somebody who is going to hold the standard and do it the way you want, because that's what we're trained to do. So I don't really have anything else to say about that other than the fact that you're missing out on opportunities just because we talk a little bit different. Our humor is a little bit colored, and we do some stuff that we do and say some stuff that may be kind of walking the HR line.
Well, there's one other thing that military brings that I don't think civilians appreciate as much as they should.
Yeah.
No. No. Put those away, John. We don't need those here. And that is the thought process, that we are taught to think outside the box and creatively solve problems. And if you've never had to live in an environment where you're told, hey, X needs to be done by X time, go. And then before you could even ask a follow-up question, the person that just gave you that order is gone. So there's no follow-ups, there's no clarification. It's get it done to standard. And odds are, what the standard is. You've got to get that creative thinking process going and not just, okay, well, this is the way it normally is done, and that's the way I do it.
Yep. And actually, I'll just throw it out here as we wrap up. The biggest killer that organizations do to their veterans when they bring these veterans in is they micromanage them, right? Both of you said it perfectly. Give them a left and right limit, right? Let them know what it is, what the goal is, and then let them go work. The second you say, hey, I need this done, and then you're over their shoulder, what are you doing? Why are you doing it this way? You're doing the exact opposite, right? Because again, as veterans, we're so used to operating in that chaos and thinking outside the box. We have this thing called the commander's intent. We know what the commander's trying to accomplish. He just sort of lets us kind of be out there as long as we're doing things legally, ethically, and morally. Right? He's going to kind of go with the flow for a minute. And you and the organization, you have to be comfortable with your people. If you have to micromanage them, you're already misaligned. And then loop that back to the culture. That says a lot more about your culture than it does about the veteran themselves.
That's true. And actually Deb just made the comment, and they move with a sense of urgency. And so what does that mean? If you're standing over their shoulder, likely that sense of urgency won't change, but the work is going to be substandard because they're not used to that. They're used to people giving them their marching orders. If they need to do some group planning, they do, but then everyone goes their separate ways and they execute unless it's a group effort for specific things. Otherwise, everyone is given their responsibilities and they execute. And if it's not done, they're held accountable in other ways. But you should never ever expect a veteran to appreciate being micromanaged. They've been working for a very long time, just getting stuff done. And by the way, the conversation that takes place after that management starts happening, it might be more colorful than you want.
Yes. And just remember, even your non-veterans don't like to be micromanaged either.
Nobody likes to be micromanaged. Don't do that. It only works for a short time. Micromanage when you're trying to move people on track, but then after they understand what your intent is, you move away and you stand back and watch.
When my wife tells me certain things need to be done when I'm on kid duty, I kind of appreciate that because, she said something to me today about as soon as we get off this, I've got to go take care of something with my son. And she was like, "Oh yeah, your daughter has Girl Scouts tonight." I was like, "Oh yeah, she does."
Okay.
And
so unless anybody has more comments, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce the topic that we're going to have next month. And that topic is we're going to be talking about the difference between soft and conventional as far as leadership is concerned.
Coming from 3 non-soft people.
I don't know, Trevor, you're a big softy.
Wait, are we talking like Air Force soft here? What kind of soft are we talking?
No, Coast Guard.
No, they are respectable. Have you seen those people who?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't mess with a Coast Guard person. Those guys are hard chargers. They're the ones who defend our borders.
On cocaine.
Yeah.
So let's talk Space Force.
Space Force.
Are they even real?
Yes, I know someone.
I mean, I've seen people in uniform around here, but this doesn't make them real. Look, I bought it at the PX, right? I could wear it.
So I don't know if this is still true or if they've actually created duty stations for this, but I think they go to Air Force boot camp anyway. So we can talk about them both in the same sentence.
Ooh, yeah, fair.
All right. Well, I have to go do dad stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And I probably got to go make dinner or whatever. I don't know yet. So we'll find out in a second. But thank you everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe. So if you're here, we've had an uptick of up to 30 people in this call so far. So, I mean, if you're rewatching this or you're watching this right now, don't forget to subscribe. You'll get notifications for when we do this every month. We're going to try to do it around the same time every month. But the show is still new. So we got some bugs to work out. This is only show number 2. Let us know what you think. Let us know what topics you want to hear, because we're not doing this just because we want to hang out and have bro time. That's not it. We're doing this because
wait a minute. You promised me gummy bears.
You have to come to Iowa to get those. Speaking of middle of nowhere, Iowa. But please let us know what you want to hear. What topics are plaguing your community when it comes to hiring veterans or when it's veterans transitioning in your community. So we want to hear about that stuff from you so that we can talk about it and address it, what you guys want, not just what we want. Thank you everybody for tuning in. And I'll be doing a post here pretty soon when we figure out what day next month we're going to be doing the next one and what that cadence is going to look like. Everybody have a good day.
Have a good one.